Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Velvete, the metaphysician, and I've had over 30 years of experience working with massage and massage therapists as an instructor, as a therapist, working in a practice, also a wellness commentator, and actually a contributor for Massage Today magazine. I have a very special guest today, and this, you know what? I never thought that anybody was in massage longer than I have been. So this is going to be really good. So this is David Scott Lynn. And when I found him on LinkedIn, I was like, really? Oh my gosh. I used to hear about structural integration when I was in school, but nobody had ever taken it the way David was as I was reading his outline. And here it is. 44 years of doing massage, David. That
Correct.
is amazing. Yeah,
Thank
awesome.
you.
And
Thanks for noticing.
and if anybody out there can beat David, you need to let me know because I really thought I was the dinosaur. So
There
you're
are a
gonna.
few. There are a few.
Yes, I bet there are. I really do. I believe that. Well, so there were a lot of things when I was looking at the information you were sharing that really intrigued me. And I thought this is something that massage therapists need to know. There was some terminology that you were using and you were wrapping around, but one of the biggest things that really caught my attention was when you said that there were better answers for the puzzles. And that is so true because when we're right out of massage school, a lot of times we just have the basics, right? We're just to duplicate what they taught us. It's not until actually we're out there that we really get to harness the extent of what we are really capable of doing. And I loved how you were able to present that. I love how you were really pulling people in as that, hey, there's so much more than what you've been taught and what you know of. And then your expertise, I mean, you've worked with physicians, you've worked as a sole practitioner, and then you really connected the mind body issues. And so this is what we're going to be talking about today. So our whole goal for you massage therapists that are listening to this is that David calls this mindful medical massage. And I really wanted to dive into what is the difference between that and just traditional massage. So, David, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. I know that you're going to be a wealth of information for therapists. So, we'll
Thank you
go
for
ahead
having
and
me.
get started. Yeah. Absolutely. So I wanted to ask you first off is can you define for us because this, even though we may have heard about medical massage, you're saying mindful medical massage. So what sets that apart from standard massage therapy and how mindfulness plays a role in therapeutic body work?
Okay, well, thanks for asking. And and I'm going to talk in generalizations, knowing that there are some people out there who do mindful massage, and they may not even think about it that way. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm the only person who does this, But still, generally speaking, most massage therapy that I'm familiar with after all these years is I call it spectator medicine, where the client comes in, lays on the table, and they just receive whatever the therapist is doing, and the therapist is more focused. And this is a generalization, but most therapists seem to be more focused on delivering the technique rather than just using the technique as a vehicle or a path to feel what's going on in the client's body. And at that point, the technique kind of dissolves. It's in some cases, it doesn't matter what you do, as long as you're making direct contact with the person. You could be working at any muscle, and much of the body will relax spontaneously, even if you're not doing anything very specific.
I like how you did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what I tell people is no massage therapist has ever relaxed the muscle in another human being. No therapist at all has ever relaxed another human being. The relaxation emanates from the brain, the mind, and the central nervous system of the client. the relaxation is something they do, or more accurately, they stop doing the tension. And the therapist only produces the environment and the support to make that easier to happen. So the more the therapist is conscious that what they're doing really is talking to the brain, mind, and central nervous system, and where you're touching and how you're touching is secondary. And if the client is also participating in communicating about what they're feeling so that they're integrating their experience to some degree, what happens is the therapist and the client form kind of an internal neuro dance where their two minds are kind of interacting with each other, and things can go much deeper and much farther and wider in scope because you're moving more into a mindful, which is a subset of meditation. Meditation is where you slow down and reduce the thinking mind and go to the meditative, experiential, greater awareness, where more things can happen. Because when you're thinking about what you're doing, you have big limitations on what you're doing. It's when the thinking is great for learning the techniques, but then you want to drop. It's like in martial arts. You think to learn how to do the techniques, but then when you get really good, you realize thinking actually gets in the way.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I love how you articulated that, and that it's really about that state of relaxation for the massage therapist as well. And just like I said at the very beginning, we learn the basic techniques so we can duplicate them and just get out there and practice. But you've brought that whole mindfulness into what you just said of like, if you get involved in thinking about the technique, you're going to lose so much value in just listening to the hands and listening to the client, listening to that energy. And I love how you added in the mind piece too, that neurological connection that we're all making together. And as a metaphysician, I totally understand about quantum mechanics, the quantum entanglement. And at that point, we're entangling with that client. And if we just focus on the technique of what we're supposed to do, rather than being mindful about it, you're right. We can just kind of get into our own head and then we forget about what the client is doing. So in what ways does this approach benefit both the client and the therapist based on what we just said?
Well, first of all, the client generally is going to have just a better experience anyway, because the therapist is more focused. I've had many conversations with therapists and clients over the years, and clients very frequently felt unheard. They'll say things like, well, I told them when I walked in I needed more work done here and there, but the therapist just did what they usually do. They said you can set your watch to what body part the therapist is going to be working on, so it's almost automated. And so the client is going to get a better experience once they get used to the communication part. Initially, it's sometimes they just want to lay back and relax, and which there's a benefit to that, and they just want their mind to drift. But when they actually start focusing on what they're feeling, the feelings go deeper and the changes go deeper and they're more global. And frequently the client would say they can't believe how much of their body is relaxing, even though I've only been working on one spot in one muscle for 10 minutes.
Yeah, I get it.
Radiating through the reticular formation at the top of the lower brain, which controls all the tonus and all of the muscles. And so when you're just putting it on one spot, but you're doing it in a mindful way, and the client is more mindful, then it's not going to be just a local response in the local tissue. It's going to be more of a global response. So the client gets much better results. The therapist, though, also gets more relaxed because they're not thinking so hard about what they're doing. They're not self-exerting performance issues, or am I doing this right? Or, do I have the timing right? All these different things that get in the way. So they can relax a lot more. And also because my technique, which I'm not I try to downplay the technique, but I have a very simple, basic thing I've been doing for 45 years. One basic technique, my toolbox is one tool with a few, other things. But I remember when I first started teaching, I would make a big deal out of standing next to the table next to the client on the table, and I have one hand resting, say, on the abdominals. I would put my other hand in my pocket and to stand there very relaxed. I was, straight and all that. And the other students who were watching, they couldn't believe how much result they could get without working so hard, because it wasn't about what I was doing to the client. It was about the connection of experience between my hand connecting with their muscles. It's kind of a homeopathic thing where when you meet, when two things, from a homeopathic massage point of view, what you're trying to do is match the client's experience. So if their muscle tension is X, you want to be applying approximately X amount of pressure, because it's at that moment when it matches where the body does not feel intruded upon, yet it's being talked to at its own level. Then changes happen dramatically, because the body's not protecting, it's not stabilizing, it's not resisting, it's just being with what is. And if you know you're not going to be causing pain or whatever, which we'll talk about a little later, then they trust you more, and when there's more trust, they can relax more. So the therapist, excuse me.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so the therapist can relax more rather than working so hard. And one of the things I used to do, when I was doing trainings, live trainings, while they were working on each other, I would go around the room and I would work on the gentle pressure on the neck and shoulders of the therapist while they were doing therapy. And always, they had their shoulders up, and I'd have them go down, and they could actually still work actually more effectively when they were more relaxed. So it's those kinds of things that kind of all gel together.
So my body is just like, oh, just have David's hands on you. That would just, so now I'm craving a massage, right? Thank goodness I have one scheduled for Friday. So that's all good.
One tip for new therapists is I built a couple of practices just going into the local health food store and just have somebody sit in a chair, do 10 to 15 minutes just on my it's not super light, but it's on the lighter side, but it is more matching the resistance rather than being light. And I would do these neck and shoulder releases, and I was 9 out of 10 people, so they would say, "Wow, this is amazing," and I built a practice just doing that.
Yeah, exactly. And so that brings up another point on marketing, which we could really kind of go into, but I really liked what you said about the client could kind of time when you were going to get to a certain spot. And and I know that the body goes into attenuation. And what that means is that if the therapist is doing the same exact technique every time, eventually the body is going to tune it out. Right. And so
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And what I would always tell my clients, because they would think they were going to get the same thing, and they would come in, I'd say, we're going to change things up today. And they'd be like, well, how so? I said, we're going to start with a whole different part of your body. I don't want your body to get used to my hands. I would tell every single client that. I do not want your body to get used to my hands. So, because people often assume all massage is the same, can you explain the key differences between muscle therapy and just regular massage?
Well, that's kind of tricky, because classical Swedish massage, which most people associate with the spa, the relaxation, back when you go back to Mr. Kellogg, way back in the, I think it was late 1800s, classical Swedish massage was very complex, had all different kinds of, but then, when some things happened, politically and all that, massage started getting sidetracked, and it actually got boxed in to just be this relaxation thing. The people didn't, the powers didn't want people thinking it was a healing modality.
That's
so
true.
It got relegated to just relaxation, luxury, have a nice time, and all that, which is legitimate. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But right now, classical Swedish, not classical, but more modern Swedish, and the spa style approach to just the regular full body, get to everything.
Mhm.
It works. Some people can get tremendous health benefits from it. Other people, they just feel better, and that's okay. Most of the feedback I've got over the years is the benefits of that tend to be gone in a day or two.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, then when you switch more over, and this was, the late 1980s, there was the big discussion in the AMTA and so forth about body work versus massage. So body work, and they eventually concluded both massage and body work in the name. But body work referred more to a more specific, trying to fix a particular thing type of a massage, rather so like if you've got tendonitis, they're just going to work on the tendonitis in your forearm rather than doing whole body massage. So there was a movement towards medical massage, and there was kind of a transition time. And so the regular massage is more about overall health, well-being, relaxation, and an hour of peace of mind where you're not worrying about the kids, type of stuff.
Right.
Whereas body work and medical massage are more about trying to resolve more complex problems of the clients who show up, who have this pain, whatever, it keeps coming back over the years or so forth. So that's the without getting too specific there, that's the general distinction. And then the medical massage just takes it a step further. Whereas, for example, I've talked to graduates from massage schools all over the country when I would ask them, well, what would you do about this, that, or the other? They said, we were never really taught evaluation of how to do, specific evaluations. We were given lots of great technique in the schools, but that's all the schools really have time for.
Right.
And so it's not like the schools are holding out on you. It's just that they didn't have time to go in depth, because it does take a lot more knowledge to do more specific. I mean, the truth is there are a lot of people out there who don't know the name of any muscle. They don't know anything, but they can give a great massage. You don't have to know the physiology of the body or even the anatomy. There are people who give great massages without knowing that stuff. But the more you want to repair problems or fix problems that people have, then the more you need to have more specific knowledge about, well, if they have pain in the patella, which are the muscles most likely to cause pain in the patella? And that would be whatever muscles connected. So, you need to know, but even that's not reliable, because a lot of times the trigger point's on the other side of the body.
That's true.
So even after 44 years, I never walk into a therapy thinking I know what's going on. When I used to teach, I would say that what we're learning is a very specific, scientific, precise approach to guesswork.
Yeah, that's right.
And our guesses are better than if we were not educated. So they're not random guesses. But people have, with all the bones and muscles and nerves and all the different things going on, it's like playing cards with a deck of 52 wild cards. There's so many things that can go on that are competing that you don't always. I've been surprised many times of what I thought was a sure thing wasn't at all. So you have to be a little comfortable with ambiguity. You got to be able to live in the question rather than identify with the answers.
I love that.
But
And I
you've
think
got
that
better answers. But you've got better
right.
answers.
That's what I was going to say too. Better answers, but it also leaves you a level of comfort to stay curious, right? So if you go in there and you think it's this, and then your client walks out worse, that's not helping anybody. And you're absolutely right. There are times, and therapists, when you're listening to this, you've experienced this, where you start working on an area and a client will tell you, but I'm not hurting over there. I'm hurting over here. But then by the time you get through working where your intuition guided you, the client's like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that I needed so much work on that side. But they're feeling that pain because that's pulling that area, right? And so that's kind of like what David is saying here, is stay curious, stay open to not just thinking that you have the answer, but be paying attention to where you might be feeling that stress coming from as well. So I think you've addressed the target muscle therapy pretty good when it comes to chronic pain. But what I'd like to ask you now are there certain conditions where myostructural massage is more effective than traditional techniques?
Well, you've kind of touched on it already, and the feedback I get from clients is that number one, I work on areas that nobody's ever worked on. Like when you're talking about the opposite, things, and you read all these books and things that back pain is from excess lordosis and anterior tilted pelvis, and in the early 80s, I figured out that a small percentage of people have excess lordosis, or the idea that forward head posture comes from weak rhomboids and tight pecs. Well, you can contract your pectoralis muscles all day long as hard as you can, and they have no effect on the position of the spine. And what even a lot of the posture experts, what first thing I do for forward head and neck posture is release and lengthen the abdominal wall, the rectus abdominis and the internal and external obliques, because they pull the rib cage down, and where the rib cage goes, the head and neck has to go. And everybody thinks it's weak back muscles. So they're trying to strengthen the back muscles to pull it. But let me ask you this, a little 2 or 3-year-old kid who's never sat in chairs a lot yet, they have perfect vertical posture. They got a perfect vertical, through the hip, the shoulder, ear, and all that stuff. And they never went to a Pilates class or yoga. There's no womb yoga that I know of. And there might be womb for yoga, but there ain't no womb yoga. So the idea here is that there are certain musculoskeletal relationships that a lot of people just haven't thought of. Right. And that's one of the abdominal wall. But okay, so for example, sometimes lengthening the abdominal wall will bring their head and neck back up. However, if their hamstrings are overshortened and their glutes are overshortened, then the abdominals are just going to shorten right back up again.
That's right.
So just working the abdominals might be enough, but in other people it won't be enough. So you got to be thinking both specifically and globally at the same time, which means you move back and forth from meditative mode to analytical mode. You got to be willing to do both.
Yeah.
In order to really do this work effectively. I've had people tell me, they read my brochures, they say, this all sounds great, but I don't want to think that hard. Which is fine. I have no problem with that. Right. But then you have the other people that are only analytical and they can't just let go and feel the other person's body. So this is really about developing both sides, both the meditative, mindful mind and the analytical, evaluative mind. We have them both for good reasons. The problem is the thinking mind is kind of overpowered, at least in the West. The thinking mind is overpowered the deeper meditative states, and things are trying to come back. That's why things like emotional intelligence and so forth are starting to make a big splash in the Western culture, because people are realizing something's missing. And if you think thought is all there is, then all you're going to get is a lot of old stuff, because all thoughts are memories from the past. Thoughts are never.
That's true.
Yep.
That is true.
You can't think the moment. You can think in the moment, but what you're thinking about is you're bringing past stuff coming forward. So to experience the moment, the mind has to quiet down.
Yes, and there's great value in that. When we're working as a therapist, we do need to slow our minds down. So I was kind of thinking about my own situation when you started talking about the hamstrings and other issues it has caused. And so what brought me to that is, I'll bet you have an extreme case that you were able to bring relief to. So, can you share an extreme
I have a few,
case?
But I got a couple special ones. One of them, which may be the most dramatic, in part because it was way easier to fix than I thought. So there's a gentleman, he was in his 40s. He was a carpenter carrying his own drywall, plywood, and tools and everything. I met him through his father, who was a friend of mine. And this gentleman, the 40-year-old, was scheduled for a second hip replacement on the same hip, because when they did the first hip replacement, they put the metal appliance in, they cut off the top of your femur and they put a metal appliance in. Okay. Well, what had happened was now that metal appliance was breaking through the wall of his pelvis.
Oh my gosh.
And this is Johns Hopkins, who had done the first surgery they were going to do. And Johns Hopkins is like one of the top in the world. So they were going to do another surgery. I don't know what they were going to do, but I met him. We talked. And so his father recommended, he worked with me. And I did the evaluation. I said, I don't think this is coming from anywhere else. I think it's in the hip. And I started working on the hip muscles right over the hip replacement area. Those muscles were so hard. They were scary hard. And if I don't know if there is such a thing as soft wood, but it's kind of like it felt like his glutes felt like soft wood. I did 3 90-minute treatments just on his glutes, a day apart, well, a day between. So 3 treatments over a week, 90 minutes of treatment, 100% elimination of pain, 100% restoration of movement, canceled the surgery, and he was still out of pain a year later without further treatment. Wow. Although I did show him some stretching, but for maintenance. But he lived in Alaska. We did this in Tennessee. He lived in Alaska, so I don't know whether he actually did the stretches or not. But I know my cousin Paul, who is one of the most highly trained orthopedic surgeons in the country and specializes in amputations. He said, look, that was my client. He said, if all you had to do is a muscle treatment every few months, he said, I wouldn't have gotten the surgery.
Wow, so that is amazing.
Tells you that, he said, anything can happen in a surgery, including you not wake up.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Oh my gosh, what a relief you provide people. And that I'm sure that other therapists that are listening to this are really going to be very intrigued on that, because that is just amazing. So, we're talking about different modalities that we can use. And I've already said, earlier I had heard about structural integrity, but with myofascial structure massage, give us an example of how to integrate it with structural alignment, muscle therapy, and mindful awareness. Can you do that?
Well, there's a number of ways to do that. Do you have a particular thing in mind, like straightening out a posture or something like that?
Let's say that somebody has a groin issue.
Mm-hmm.
And that they've not had any relief. And and I want to bring this up too, because so many times when it comes to the groin area, that's a no kind of area for massage therapists, right? They become very weird about it. They hesitate about it. But what my mind's thought is right now, and my mindset is that if we add the myo-structural, maybe we have a way of working with the groin without actually working on it.
Well, sometimes, yes, because, just to refer back to something that you mentioned earlier, one of the more surprising things that happened for me once is releasing somebody's hamstring muscles, his suboccipitals started to relax.
Wow.
That's pretty far removed. And what was interesting is I was just about to stop. I was working on his hamstrings because it was just kind of part of what his general overall postural thing. And nothing much was going on. I was just about to pull out, and I said, no, let's stay in here a little longer. I stayed a little, and then all of a sudden he says, oh my God, my suboccipitals muscles are starting to release. So there is no muscle that goes from the hamstrings to the suboccipitals. There's muscles that, in between, but there's not a direct connection.
Right.
And then some people will say, well, it's the fascial sheaths, which is a whole nother conversation, which I have a lot to say about. I don't know if we'll have time to get into that. But the point is that what fires together, wires together. So for example, I know I'm going off of your question here for a moment. So I had a client who had carpal tunnel-like symptoms in her wrists. She was a neuromuscular therapist. but the trigger point for her wrists were in the side of her abdominals, between the hip and the rib and the obliques.
Wow.
Why would that happen? Well, think of yourself as sitting at the head of a table and you're working on a client's neck and you're pressing with your thumbs into their neck or shoulders. And as you press forward into their body, your torso
Yeah.
moves back.
Yes.
So in order to not fall backwards, your abdominal muscles have to shorten to keep your rib cage from falling back. So what fires together, wires together, the muscles contracting in her waist were firing at the same time as the muscles that in her forearms and wrists. So they wired together because they fired together.
Right.
So they don't have to have any direct connection.
Mm-hmm.
Even with the nerves control the waist muscles, the abdominal muscles. It's not the same nerve trunks going all the way up to the neck and to the wrist. It's completely different, but they do talk to each other through the central nervous system.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So getting back to the groin thing is pretty interesting because it can come from so many different things because it's kind of in the center and the core of the body. And like martial arts and things they talk about, everything really moves from the core, from the tan, from the lower abdominal region. So you can have anything from something in the foot, a pain in the foot, release that, and it goes right up into the groin area where the person has the problem because the sciatic nerve has that connection, right? On the other hand, my partner, who was learning my work, when I met her, she was one of the top neuromuscular therapists in the country. And what she found out, it took a while, and it was one of those personal things. His spermatic cord, which is the muscle that surrounds the tube that goes from the testes, up into the genitals, that spermatic cord had contracted so much and was pulling the testicle up, and that was creating all the pain. So with his permission, she started working on the spermatic cord. That's pretty personal, and so this gets back to what we were talking about earlier. You got to be open for anything.
Yeah.
And this is where the old trigger point charts were good to people get started. But if you tried to use the trigger point charts to determine all the possibilities, even Simmons and Travell, when they wrote the big neuromuscular, Simmons said he tried to map all the possible trigger points to me. He said he couldn't do it. There's just too many thousands of them.
That's right.
So this is why I can't give you a specific, well, if you've got a groin problem, do this. Because it could come from the adductors. It could come from muscles in the foot. It could come from, like I used to wake up in the middle of the night with pain in one leg or the other, not usually both, and burning sensation. It would take me 2 or 3 hours of stretching to get the pain to go away in my legs, all the way down to the calves. One night by accident, I had a knobble, one of these things here.
Yeah.
A wooden massage tool.
Yeah.
And on a lark, I laid on my back and I took this thing and I put it in my upper lower back, just below the rib cage. And I just laid back on it. And I really don't know why I did that. Within a few minutes, all the pain in my legs were gone.
Wow.
So I did that every night. So instead of 2 or 3 hours a night of working to stretch and this, that, and I was doing it kind of like randomly, I got to where the point was I started doing this thing. And after a few weeks, I didn't occasionally I would wake up from the pain. But what was interesting, it was the right side of my back, but it would show up either in the left leg or the right leg, not both. But it was so, there was something going on that I'll be honest with you, I never quite figured out for sure what was the neurological. It's got to have something to do with the vertebral muscles and all that stuff. I never quite mapped it out because it's so complicated. So this, excuse me.
No, go ahead.
So this is where what I tell my students, people who have learned my work, is that you start with the things that are most likely, and then you work backwards from there.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been times where I felt lucky that I finally figured out what was going on. And
Right.
you know, but if I hadn't been doing that, they'd still be years later in pain. And
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of these people I worked on were in pain for 20 or 30 years. And and sometimes it's not coming from somewhere else. If I may, there was one other client, and she had a knot in her lower scalenes here on the left side. It's about the size of a quarter, $half or so. And I checked around, tried to figure out if it was other things. And working on her right, this is her left, working on her right waist did relieve some of the pressure, but it didn't fix anything.
Mm-hmm.
So finally, I started working just on that quarter to a $half spot, and it literally felt like a bone. That's how tight it was. I'm not
Yeah.
exaggerating. I did about 31-hour treatments on that spot, not moving more than an inch in any direction.
Mm-hmm.
We
Wow.
gave her complete relief, but she had been paying, and one of my best testimonials on my website was from her. She had been paying for 20 or 30 years. Her acupuncturist had been the acupuncturist for the president of China, a
Wow.
year earlier, and she was exposed to some of the top alternative healthcare people in the country. She lived in Seattle, but nobody had ever been able. Nobody had the patience to just
That's it.
hold that pressure. And I say it's easier to open the door before you walk through it, because people would try to break it down.
Yeah.
But when a muscle gets a certain degree of irritation, when you try to break it down, it's just going to fight back,
That's right.
or it will relax. And then when the client gets up and walks away, it starts tightening up right back up again.
Exactly. Exactly.
Delayed reaction. And I
Mm-hmm.
also say, okay, it's easy to open the door before you walk through it, and you can't peel an onion from the inside out. So you think of a layer of an onion, and that muscle is like an onion, and you open, and each layer of the onion is a doorway to the next layer of the onion. And it's thin layer by thin layer by thin layer. And the biggest challenge is keeping getting enough results soon enough that the client doesn't give up.
That's exactly right. You know, go ahead. You want to go ahead and I want to
I
give.
was going to say that's part of the conversational. It should start in the
Mhm.
marketing. When you market this, if you do this
Yeah.
stuff, you should in your marketing be educating people about how complex it can get without
Mm-hmm.
scaring.
One of the examples that I used to give my clients, because they would experience that, where you're working with that muscle and all of a sudden that muscle starts trying to buck you off, right? The muscle's bucking you off, it's quivering, it's doing all this stuff. And I just say, hey, this is like riding a horse. It's trying to buck me off. We're going to stay with it right now. And they were always so glad that they did. They really were. Well,
Yes.
that's a really amazing story regarding the scalings there, because I know a lot of us are working within that. But, with all of that and all of the, amazing stories, what really inspired you to develop this technique?
Well, that's an interesting story. I grew up I knew I had to be a teacher even before I was 10 years old, but all I knew about was teaching in grade school. I never heard about workshops or seminars, so I kind of wrote teaching off. And I didn't relate to being a professor. But then what started it all is I was kind of a wimpy kid, and I did go to military school for a year when I was in 8th grade. But when I was 13 years old, for primarily self-defense reasons, I got into martial arts. And in the south suburbs of Chicago in the 1960s, we're not, or 60s, we're not talking about anything very mystical. It was all about self-defense, period. But I had an accidental meditation experience. It just happened for me one night. And at 13 years old, I had this experience of things worked better when I wasn't thinking about what I was doing. And it happened often enough. There's a little more to the story, but I'll keep it short. But it happened often enough that night that I realized, wow, when I'm thinking about what I'm doing, it doesn't work as well. And then a few months later, my mom bought me a book on karate from one of the world masters, Asatatu Oyama. And in the end of the book, it talked about meditation. So I'm reading this book and I read this little chapter on meditation and go, wow, that's what happened to me that night. I didn't have a name for it. And so I went to the Dalton Public Library looking for a book on meditation. Nothing. But I remember the book I read said something about Buddhism. And they were a Zen Buddhist descendant. So I went over to the religion section and I found a book on Buddhism, which happened to be the Dhammapada, which was supposedly the words of Buddha. Took the book out and started doing the meditations right out of the book. Now, the rest of my teens, I was a motocross, raced motocross, dirt bikes on rough terrain. I was a structural steel iron worker, one of the heaviest constructions you can get in. But I was always in the back of my mind trying to apply meditation and not thinking to everything I was doing. And I was 19, I got into yoga, mostly for physical reasons, but I was taught by a guy named Joel Kramer, who really had a lot of psycho-philosophical aspects to yoga. And so I got very interested. And all through my teens, I was reading books on all these spiritual things and healing and all that. And then Joel Kramer came along, and I ended up in 1976 taking a 1-month training in physical, mental, and relational yoga from him and his partner. And that changed my life. I couldn't go back to ironworking. And even though I was already a foreman by the time I was 18, which is kind of unusual in Chicago or somebody that young to be a foreman. And I was offered superintendent job, really good money and everything, but I decided to become a yoga teacher.
Well, this all kind of starts making sense of why you would have integrated this mindfulness into your massage then, right? Because you were kind of divinely guided to this. I mean, your mother handed you a book. She handed you a book, and that's what opened up your whole reality to looking at this in a whole different way and start your own spiritual journey. And a lot of us massage therapists, we're so connected to that, right? So many of us are. So, well, speaking of that, about our future and evolving, because we're all evolving. You evolved, there you were at 18 as a foreman, and then all of a sudden, so how do you see myo-structural massage evolving in the future?
Well, what I think is going on, part of why I stayed in therapy is because there was a man named Fernando Flores, who was a kind of a philosopher and a psychology and a computer technology guy. And he brought this guy named Maturana, Humberto Maturana, and Francisco Varela, who had worked with the Dalai Lama and different people in trying to bridge science and meditation at Naropa Institute in Boulder and so forth. Ken Wilber type of stuff. I'm familiar with Ken Wilber, but he's a living philosopher that is just amazing. But Fernando Flores, we were at Harvard University doing trainings for PhD physicians, and Fernando at a bodywork conference, he did a conference for body workers in California. He said he believed that hands-on body work through massage and body workers could do more to change the future of humanity than any of the medical field or anything, because we were actually changing the structure of the body, which goes back to Alfred Korzybski and the colloidal structures of the body, which are fascia. And that's who Ida Wolf learned about fascia from, and so forth. So there's been this evolution. And I always looked at it from the bigger, social structure. And right now we're going into a big change in the world with the artificial intelligence, which I prefer to call augmented intelligence. Elon Musk has said that his new Optimus Gen 3 robot can do massage really well. Mayo Clinic's using massage bots to deliver medical massage. There's a clinic in Shanghai. They've got 8 clinics in Shanghai, all using the same machine that Mayo Clinic is using to do medical massage. Things are going to be changing, I think, big time.
Well, and you're already saying they are.
They're already changing. And the only question is, how soon will it affect how many of us?
Right. Because
if you're one of those people who they can set your watch to, you have a 50-50 chance of being replaced by a robot.
Well, I mean, just even where I work out at Planet Fitness, and they used to have like hands-on massage therapists. Now they have the waterbed massage, which feels awesome after a workout. And then they have the massage chairs that you're in. So they no longer have anybody who's doing chair massage. However, I just want to stress this because you're absolutely right. We know that those things are here already, that they have been using them. But even when I do or have receive a chair massage where the chair is doing the work or the waterbed massage, it's nothing like human to human contact. And we've got to make sure that we're taking care of that human to human contact. And the only way that we're really going to be able to do that is by making sure that we're professional, making sure that we're staying on top of our game,
Right.
making sure that we're, one of the very first articles I wrote in Massage Today magazine was the evolution of massage. And
Yep.
it took by storm. I mean, everybody was calling me regarding it. But it's important to know now, and that was over 15 years ago when I wrote that article. And never in my mind did I ever think that we would be replaced by robots. But the evolution of massage is something that's very real, and we need to take care of that. So before we move on to
Well, I haven't answered your question yet.
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
The answer to the
I
question
I got excited.
yeah, it's okay. I didn't know that about you, and I'm glad to know that. The thing is that what I'm seeing is that more and more people are starting to recognize, general public are recognizing that massage therapy can fix problems that they never dreamed of. They're physicians. It's changing. More physicians are recommending massage, but a lot of them will just say, "Well, you'll feel better." They don't really. Most physicians do not understand the potential of quality body work. And I maintain that most massage therapists, most yoga teachers do not realize what they have. What they have. They do. I believe they need to upgrade their education some along the lines of the things we're talking about, so that they can handle the more complex things. But one of the big things I see coming is that it's already happening, that the emotional intelligence field is blowing open, because businesses are starting, like even Harvard Business Review writes about how salespeople who are emotionally intelligent will triple their results. Data programmers who are emotionally intelligent, strangely enough, it increases their results. So it's being so. And the thing about emotional intelligence compared to AI is that most of what a human being is an emotional intelligence processor, and thinking is just a subset, a small portion of that. And one of our opportunities is to start marketing that to the public, to say, we can get you more in touch, because it's your physical body that does the processing. And the more in touch you are with your physical body, the more you're going to be in touch with your emotional processing, which is really the same thing. And it will, and this is why so many people who do yoga and bodywork will write about how, yeah, my perspective on the world just changed from being more in touch with their body without any psychotherapy or philosophical ideas. It just started happening. So I believe that's one area, and it's going to be more affluent people who are going to be looking for that, because they're going to be in higher management stuff. And if AI does take lots and lots of jobs, the number of people who can afford what we do is going to go down, and they're going to have to go to Massage Envy, who's doing $20 massages with a machine.
That's right.
Stuff like that.
Mhm.
Like I said, though, there are many problems people have that aren't programmable in. It's too much guesswork, and maybe 10 or 20 years, maybe people like me will be programming all those possibilities in. But we've got to probably at least 5 or 10 or more years before any machine is going to be able to do that. So I'm suggesting that therapists need to upgrade their knowledge to be able to, what I talk about in my marketing is about finding those, being able to treat more complex, long-term, chronic, and difficult to treat conditions of their clients, and let other people do the more classical or the more, spa, relaxation, type stuff, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a valuable thing. Um, but to start thinking and talking about in the higher levels of what we can do, instead of just, making people feel better, because we can make them feel better in much more profound ways. I had one of my earliest experiences. I had an executive at a publishing firm. I had been working with him every other week, on Sundays, and I came in to do another session. I was going to his house, and he said, David, he said, I lost my job this week. He said, I can only blame it on one thing. He said, I'm blaming it on you, on me. Why is that? Well, when I got his posture straightened out, he told me he was looking at the world in a completely different way, because when your posture changes, your stature changes.
That's true.
And at work, he started talking back to his bosses. He said some stuff that they didn't like.
Yeah.
So they fired him. Now, he told me in the end it was the best thing that ever happened. He ended up with a much better job, but he was a new person, because, and I didn't coach him on, okay, we're going to change your viewpoints on how to deal with your boss. It was just getting his posture decompressed and balanced.
Right.
Back to nature originally intended it, not by teaching him new things to do, but to stop doing the things that were getting in the way of the natural forces built into the body by nature.
Right.
And that's what made the changes without me thinking I was a psychotherapist or a business coach. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what I think.
Those
are the parts. Excuse me.
Yeah, when you make people feel better, they're going to feel better about their life. They are going to stand up. And isn't it interesting? Because as a metaphysician, somebody who's bent over like that usually has that lowly sense of being, right? You're fixing that, and they stand up and they're like, hey, I'm proud of myself, right? I have worth, I have value in this world, right? So I'd like to share the screen of a couple of things that you created for the therapists to take a look at it. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine. I tried to summarize a bunch of pages down into just a couple. So basically, I've been out of the picture for a number of years, taking care of parents, things like that. But I'm going back into training people in my therapy system, and I'm calling it the School of Hard Knots. And
I love that.
Thank you. And it's part of it is a high level. Excuse me.
I didn't say
there's a little feedback, I guess. Part of it includes a master class on muscles, but notice at the top of the slide says knowing how it works, tells you how to work it. Knowing the physiology and anatomy of the body at a deeper level, and this is what I've been told by some of the top people in the country. I mean, back years ago, my clients and students were presidents and executive board members of the American Massage Association, owners of some of the biggest schools in the country. And I was considered one of the groundbreakers in a number of concepts. But knowing how it works tells you how to work it. Means that if you know how the body works, you don't need somebody to give you a to-do list of every single thing that could happen and then what to do about it. You can start to develop that sense and that knowledge, your wisdom on your own. So the more you understand how the body works, the less you need somebody to give you a list of, well, my groin hurts, what do I do about it? Okay, and so it gives you that map. And so one of my basic premises is that if you know how it works, you can produce better answers to the puzzles of posture, pain, and pathology, with a focus on performance and prevention. And when I say performance, I mean something as simple as bending down to tie your shoes versus being a high-end polo player or a master musician. So performance can be anything. And of course, prevention is such that we prefer our clients not get into trouble in the first place. And so we give them the tools that by which they can start doing self-preservation if they want self-maintenance. And that comes primarily from getting their parasympathetic nervous system as active as possible, because that's where I believe most of the self-healing processes of the body originate from, is the parasympathetic system. So down on the left side of the slide there, so you can take your practice to the next level of working effectively and efficiently with your most complex, long-term, chronic, difficult to treat clients, soft tissue issues. And over on the right there, it's an in-depth knowledge of the myostructural anatomy, kinesiology, physiology, and neurology of how the psycho-neuromusculofacial system works and how it breaks down. I believe if you have that basic knowledge, you don't need as much as many good ideas from other people on what do I do now, because you'll just sort of know. Now, one advantage I have over a lot of people, when I started teaching yoga, I was doing yoga 4 hours a day on my own personal practice. I learned a lot about what makes the muscle really release and where the relationships are. But I also had a lot of trauma from racing motorcycles and ironworking, so I had a lot more problems to deal with. I suggest that, and one of the reasons I include yoga in what we do, what I call Let Go Yoga, is because it's foundational to my hands-on therapy system. And in fact, I used to call my hands-on work an externally applied form of physical mental yoga.
Nice.
And so I'm not saying you have to do yoga. I'm saying that it does change your experience of what you're doing with clients. It's my belief. And then here's just a list of the things that we talk about in the program as far as on the technique end. This page is heavy on the science. But at the bottom, it talks about the philosophy, psychology, and science of being human. And we talk a lot about what makes us tick, how the mind and the body interact and so forth, so that the sciences give you how to work with the body itself. But we also do a lot with the meditative, mindful aspects of being, so that you have more of a balanced sense of your mindful, meditative mind working in concert with your thinking, analytical mind, and so that they balance each other out rather than one being dominant over the other. Or more accurately, when you should be in meditative mode, you're there. When you should be in analytical mode, you're there. You can go back and forth or stay in between as the situation requires. And if you want to get to my main page where I describe most of these on the previous slide, it is members.davidscottlynn.com is one way to get to that page. And there you will get, I surprised myself. I spent a month, putting in as much information as I could so that people know what they really, I'm not interested in working with people who just want to, this is not a weekend workshop. This is 15 modules, a few hours a week. You get a 1 hour call with me every week that you're in the program, so that my job is to make sure you're incorporating the information and applying it to your practice, or maybe even redesigning your practice from the ground up if you want to become known. What I did when I started in this, everybody wanted the regular, more massagey type stuff. I decided, if I'm going to master this, and I'm not saying you have to do this, I just stopped doing all the other stuff and just focused on structural bodywork, because it kind of forced me to become a master of it. And I'm not even saying I should have done it that way. Sometimes I think I should have, but most people would prefer to just feel good. But when they start getting the results, they realize, oh my God, this is really game changing. But we would never have gotten there if I had just stuck with the other stuff.
That's right. That's what it sounds like. How else can therapists get hold of you? I know I found you on LinkedIn. Just happened to be there. Is that a way they can connect with you as well?
Yeah, LinkedIn is an excellent way to do it. I'm on that website at members,
DavidScottLynn.com.
DavidScottLynn.com. There's a big white button at the top. You can click that, and it takes you to a message page. And for this is controversial doing this, but I'll give out my phone number if because there's a number of people do it, and they say they actually don't get that many calls. So I can give my phone number if you want.
Yeah, because I have other therapists that give their phone number too. So I'll just go ahead and let you do that if you'd like.
Right. So my business phone number is 928-255-6677. How I
Easy.
got such a good number, I don't know. I didn't go through it, it showed
That
up,
is a good number.
So it's 928-255-6677. And if they don't get through, leave a message. If they have any troubles, they can go to members at members.davidscotland.com, or they can just go to info@davidscotland.com and send an email.
Okay,
So,
now I have a question for you regarding the course, because you said it's the 15 modules. Is this a self-paced, like, let's say that somebody falls upon this recording in 3 months. Can they just pick it up anytime?
The only thing I say is the current iteration, the first is a pilot program. I'm going to do this for 12 people at a ridiculously low price. If you compare it with going to Wolfing School for $25,000, and I'm nowhere near that. The first group of 12 will get extraordinary attention and work with me, because this is a pilot program. I've never taught everything that I know online before, so I'm requesting that for the low price that they give me interaction. The idea is to design the program as much as possible around their interests and needs, not just my so-called good ideas. Now, in 3 months, if I've already gone through that group, it'd probably be more expensive, or I will take out the one-on-one direct contact and just switch to group coaching, which can be just as effective. But yeah, so this is assuming the program is a success, which a number of people tell me it should be. In 3 months, it's the kind of thing they can start from zero. It's a drip feed type of a program. It's not like everybody starts on day one. I haven't set it up that way. That's just too complicated. So anybody will be able, and I have an option where they can just pay per module. It's more expensive, but if they just want to pay per module, so they can pay for the first group of 12, it's going to be $2,500 for the 15 modules, and that includes the one-on-one coaching. And nowadays, one-on-one business coaching goes from $200 to $5 a session. So, they're basically getting their educational part of it for free because they get to talk to me. But there's also the 3-pay, and then there's also a membership site but it would take about 1.5 years for them to get through the whole thing on the membership site. But so I've tried to make it as accessible to as many people as possible and still be able to pay some bills and things.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, David, for being here today and really providing some enlightenment to us in a whole variety of ways. I mean, things that therapists probably haven't thought of before. And I really love your technique and how to bring that mindfulness to everything that we're doing. And it sounds like you guys that are watching this as massage therapists, that you're going to get a lot of business tips from David as well when taking his course. So it's not just about what you're going to do with your hands, but it's also going to be what you do with your mind, your money, and your career as a whole. So David, thank you again for being here, and I look forward to having you on again.
Thank you, Dr. Velvete. I appreciate it. Enjoyed chatting with you, and hopefully we'll do it again soon.
All right, take care.